Good morning and welcome to Team Talk. For those of you who've joined us before, welcome back. For those of you who are new to Team Talk is basically where we get together with experts and we pick their brains. You know, because while I have researched this for 20 years and I know quite a bit, I definitely do not know everything. So today we have with us my good friend, Dr. Terry Hagan. And Terry Hagan started out as a neurosurgeon, and then he became more interested in other aspects of the brain, like how the brain works, how people think. And so now he runs a successful psychiatry business in my hometown, my birthplace, Louisville, Kentucky. And so today we are going to talk about body dysmorphic disorder. So hi, Terry, welcome.
Hi, Kim.
Or I should say welcome back.
Welcome back, right?
Yeah. So body dysmorphic disorder, I know that's something that maybe not everyone has even heard of. So could you kind of just describe what it looks like?
Sure. Well, body dysmorphic disorder is a psychiatric diagnosis, and the simple description of it is that people can become a bit too focused on a body defect in which they or flaw in which they believe that it's a problem, and they focus on it to an excessive degree. And one of the criteria for making the diagnosis is that there be significant impairment in social or occupational functioning or other important functioning.
Yeah.
And that it is not better explained by a diagnosis of eating disorder. So lots of times, of course, this recording is in that overall context of eating disorder comorbidities. And comorbidity means that there are two different, we'll call them disease processes. I think that's a bit strong a term for a lot of the psychiatric diagnoses, but if we could just use that word, it's like you got two different things going on at the same time, or more importantly, occurring side by side. So one can have an eating disorder and a body dysmorphic disorder.
Yeah.
But we would not, on the other hand, take someone who has a clear eating disorder and otherwise describe them as body dysmorphic disorder unless they also met the criteria for body dysmorphic disorder. All right. So, for instance, let's say that we have a patient, and just off the top of my head, let's say we've got an 18-year-old girl who is anorexic. And what makes her anorexic? Well, by definition, by definition, 85% of ideal body weight.
Yeah.
And ideal is low in a lot of cases. I mean, we're pretty thin when we're at ideal. So then if we drop below that by another 15%, then that's too skinny and unhealthy. And so, but that defines anorexia. Okay. What we want to use, anorexia to try to move into a similar concept, which is the person. So if an anorexic believes I'm fat, then and people look at her, you're not fat. Well, that person believes that she's fat, and that is and then fat is unacceptable. So then she goes to great lengths to get her weight down. And the challenge of anorexia is breaking into that belief, which is hard to do. The good news is that a lot of teenagers with anorexia will outgrow it. But if they don't, then it becomes even harder to to deal with, and sometimes to keep them alive. Now, so anorexia is clearly an eating disorder. It's in that group: anorexia, bulimia, and then binge eating disorder. In body dysmorphic disorder, it may be focused on fat, or it may be focused on muscle, as in the guy who's already muscular, and anybody would think that, but he believes that he just doesn't have enough muscle in his body and that something is wrong.
Yeah.
And he focuses on that, and he compares himself with other people, and he spends an inordinate amount of time thinking about it and obsessing on it, to the point that he's compromising his social relationships and maybe his job, and he doesn't like it. He sees it happen. It's like you got one part of your brain, and the other part of your brain is watching the one that's doing all this and hates it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a really fascinating interplay between, having an awareness on the one hand, but then this rather automatic, deeply entrenched belief on the other hand. So then people with body dysmorphic disorder can get caught up on symmetry. It's like my face is not exactly the same on each side. I mean, let's use me for an example. Okay, so I suffered an injury a number of years ago. My only experience on a skateboard, or no, it wasn't a skateboard. It was rollerblades.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had an accident and bam, right onto the asphalt, and broke the bones in my face. Worst black eye you can imagine. And as a result of that, the appearance of this side of my face then is actually a little bit better than this side, where my eyelid's a little bit droopy. And so if you really look at that,
I still
you see
can't.
a difference. Well, there's a difference. There's an important difference between this side of my face and this side, and that this has this droopy eyelid. Okay, got that?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because one of the things with body dysmorphic disorder is that you see it, and a lot of times other people can't.
Okay.
Like
Well, okay. In my case, it's clearly there, and there's a reason for it. Okay, now, but I don't let it bother me. But every now and then I look at it and I think, it would take just a very little plastic surgery operation just to fix that, and then it would look about the same on each side. Maybe I'll do that sometime.
Yeah.
There's nothing abnormal about that. But let's say, on the other hand, that I just started focusing on that too much. And I'm thinking everybody's seeing that. It's like everybody who looks at me is seeing that and judging me, and it looks awful. And the more I think about it, the more kind of this, and then I start to spend hours a day worrying about it, avoiding going out in public, because everybody sees it, and it's so incredibly embarrassing. I can't bring myself to do it. It just causes way too much anxiety. So notice my social relationships are impaired. My relationships at work are also impaired. And the point is, it has become excessive to the point where there is significant distress.
Yeah.
And significant impairment in social and occupational functioning, and it's not better explained by an eating disorder. This is the way psychiatrists think about diagnosis, that the DSM-5, Diagnostic Statistical Manual, 5th edition, is our system for diagnosing, and so we take that quite seriously. So I just listed the criteria. There has to be a belief. And then the belief has to be excessive, and it has to cause significant impairment. And in this case, it cannot be better explained by an eating disorder. So that's the very simple version of it. So then the really fascinating thing is, well, but what if it is focused? If it is comorbid with eating disorder?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you brought up the well, if I get plastic surgery, because in today's society, that's the fix for every flaw. oh, I have too much fat here, let's just get liposuction. Oh, I have too much this, I have too much that, let's just get liposuction. And
So,
using myself
so
as an example, I have done liposuction 4 times. 4. You know,
mhm.
so even, you know, you think, oh, if I just get this surgery, everything will be perfect, but it's like there's not a level of perfect that you get to when you have body dysmorphic disorder. It's like it's never going to be good enough no matter what you do to it.
Well, so I will share with you that, 30 years ago or more, I had liposuction to remove love handles.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, I'm glad I did that. I've kind of enjoyed the benefit from that all along. Has to do with how good my waistline looks. But I do remember at the time I was thinking, well, that wasn't so bad. I could. And then I started thinking about my nose.
oh
I
yeah,
started thinking, well, I've got a scar on my nose here. I'm wondering if I can lessen that scar. If we were to do something to kind of bring the nose down a little bit, then it wouldn't be coming up the way it is. And at that point, yeah, so you can imagine, I mean, we laugh about it, but
yeah,
you can imagine that some brains start thinking that way,
oh yeah,
and then it gets developed. The more
yeah,
you think about it, the stronger the circuitry gets and the harder it is to
yeah,
break.
oh,
So
absolutely,
body dysmorphic disorder begins in teenage years almost always,
yeah,
and I'm talking as early as 12.
yeah,
And it also tends to develop in a child who's growing up with a lot of abuse or neglect.
yeah,
So that what it tends to represent, if you want to try to interpret why that would be, it is the child controlling what he or she can control
yeah,
in an environment where it is emotionally chaotic, and they're having to protect themselves from all that abuse and neglect that's going on, which is the opposite of nurturing. And so what we do is we see children who will then start to control what they can control,
yeah.
even to the point of backing away into their own little world, their own reality, with you know, what do they call them? These pretend friends,
Oh
and imaginary friends, um, and and uh, and so the point is that body dysmorphic disorder may easily then be a control
yeah,
uh, uh, disorder,
yeah,
very similar to, and it is in the DSM-5, it is in the same chapter with OCD
yeah,
and other disorders that represent certain rigidity.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, Yeah, so the body dysmorphic disorder then, like anorexia, is a disorder in which the child is taking control of something that she or he can control, and then it's getting overdeveloped
yeah.
to the point where it's unhealthy.
Yeah, well, and even you bring up childhood, and one of the potential triggers is, you know, as a child hits puberty and their body starts changing and they don't know how to interpret the changes, a lot of times that can bring it on too. Like, oh my gosh, like I have reached puberty before my friends and now I have breasts, or my hips are starting to widen, or, you know, I'm, you know, just taller than the rest of the other kids. A lot of times kids don't know how to interpret that, so they interpret it to say, well, I'm different, therefore I'm wrong. This is a
Well, that's
wrong part of my body.
again, if we get back to the environment that they're growing up in, if they had parents that they could trust, talk to,
Yeah,
and say, I don't feel good about myself, honey, that's perfectly normal. You're going to grow out of that. You do not need to worry about that. Then that's what the child needs to hear. That's the nurturing that the
yeah,
child needs in that moment.
yeah,
And if we then look at anxiety, so anxiety would be the much more common uh, uh, condition associated with an abusive and neglectful childhood, what we call a chaotic emotional environment. Um, those children get anxious, particularly girls, and they it so then anxiety is comorbid with
yeah, yeah,
body dysmorphic disorder, and for that matter, other eating disorders, not other eating disorders, but the eating disorders, starting with anorexia,
Yeah.
or bulimia, then is anxiety and stress eating to the point where you binge, and then the disgust comes in to the point where you may then purge that.
Yeah.
Uh, we again get into eating disorders, but the point is to say that what we have to be careful about with psychiatric diagnoses is that they are labels.
Yeah.
And the reason they are labels, again, a psychiatric diagnosis is not a label put on a disease process. All right. So, example, if I tell you that you have appendicitis, then I'm telling you that you have a problem with your appendix. The
Yeah.
itis means inflammation of. Okay. So I'm telling you that your problem is inflammation of your appendix and that there's a treatment for that. Okay.
Yeah.
If I tell you that you have body dysmorphic disorder, then I'm telling you not that you have a disease process in your brain, although there is that hardwiring pattern uh, that is not it's no longer normal. But what I'm telling you is that you have a list of symptoms
Yeah.
that justifies that label. So every psychiatric diagnosis is a list of symptoms and criteria that justify then the label.
Yeah.
So for instance, significant impairment in social or occupational functioning
Yeah.
is a criterion to be met in order to justify the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And
But
that's how a lot of people with eating disorder then
yeah.
might look like maybe there's a body dysmorphic thing going on, but it's not enough to meet criteria for that diagnosis.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even that though, it does leave a lot of room for interpretation. Like if you say, a lot of the time you're focused on this or significant impairment, and I think that for patients and for therapists alike, that can be, it's a gray area that you can kind of play with. But as a patient, you go, because I'm sure that a lot of women, we're like pinching at, oh my God, look at this. Oh, this is too big. And even women will sit around and have little competitions. Oh no, look at this, look at that. I need to lose, and it's very unhealthy because it perpetuates that idea that hey, there is a standard, but
I'm sorry, not so fast. Okay. We need to be careful about our words here. A bunch of women sitting around feeling comfortable enough with each other to point out a little bit of this or that is not considered abnormal. So when we say it's very unhealthy, what I think you really mean is that may not be a particularly healthy way of looking at yourself physically, nor do we want to go to the other extreme and glorify that full figure or worse yet, the big woman. Okay, as if that is normal. It is still not healthy and therefore not normal. And so I just wanted to be careful with our terms here because I wouldn't want people to feel uncomfortable that if they're talking about their bodies that already is abnormal.
oh no, absolutely. But just because it happens all the time doesn't mean it's healthy. I mean, there is a level where I go, okay, there's a healthy range, and the healthy range doesn't look the same for everybody. And so a lot of times when we have these discussions about, our body dissatisfaction, it does kind of create this healthy self-perception, and the thing is, if we can just kind of get out of that habit of, hey, let's sit around and, and pick at ourselves, oh, look at this, look at that. It's one thing to to be bonding. It's one thing, but it is unhealthy to perpetuate this idea that there is something wrong with you because, maybe you have a love handle, or maybe your thighs are a little too big, because there's an acceptance of your body that I think we need as a society, that we do need to promote more than what we do. And even when we look at our children, you know, the conversations that we're having in front of our children can even perpetuate dysfunctional thinking. Oh my gosh, like my mom is, you know, she's healthy, you know, her body looks nice, but she thinks that there's something wrong with her, you know, and so it can perpetuate an unhealthy pattern of thinking.
So, yeah, I think this would be a good point to bring in the concept of perfectionism again,
Yeah.
because perfectionism
Yeah.
is an extreme, and what I know to look for and remind people about is that we all, in order to try to simplify and otherwise understand things, we tend to oversimplify, oftentimes into this or that. I'm
Yeah.
either fat or I'm not.
Yeah.
And so then clearly I'm fat, therefore I'm not healthy. And but to your point, it uh, one of your points, it is one thing to be 10 pounds overweight and to be
Yeah.
totally obsessed with that to the point where you believe something's terribly wrong with you,
Yeah.
versus uh, I'm 150 pounds overweight and that's me, and I'm going to glorify that because
Yeah.
I'm going to
Exactly.
have a
Yeah.
healthy self-esteem. And I I had this experience one day. I may have told you this. I was getting my hair cut, and the woman cutting my hair was, I'm going to guess she was maybe 26, 27 years old, and she was at least 80 pounds overweight. I mean, she was a hefty girl.
Yeah.
Okay, short hair, kind of tough, and in terms of personality, and so then she, you know, just as a way of making conversation, asked me what I was going to do this afternoon. And actually, I was getting a haircut because I was planning to record some videos later in the day in my weight loss program that I'm working on. And so I told her I was going to record some weight loss videos later in the day. Well, she started talking about how people think yada yada, and so just to make a long story short, uh, she was making this very strong argument that because she ate healthy food, she was healthier than people she knows who are not overweight and eat crap.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
that was an example of, if they eat crap and I don't, then my being overweight then is better than their eating crap,
Yeah.
and therefore I'm okay being overweight. That was actually what she wanted me to believe, that even though it was obvious that she was overweight, that she did not consider that to be a problem at all. And
Yeah.
in fact, she was so forceful with that I just kind of went quiet. I thought, okay, she is not open. I mean, I was trying to say, well, being overweight in and of itself is unhealthy,
Yeah.
but she would not go there. And as
Yeah.
soon as I saw that, okay, I'm just here to get a haircut.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not here. This is not a patient sitting in front of me that I'm trying to work with. And
Yeah.
so I let it drop, but I just thought it was very interesting. She didn't know I was a psychiatrist. So she didn't know anything about me, but she took that moment to, you know, make her point
Yeah.
really strongly that, because she eats healthy food, she is healthy, even though she might be overweight. You
Yeah.
get the idea.
Well, it's interesting because I think even from a medical standpoint, there is kind of a tendency to look at someone and go, oh, thin, healthy, overweight, not healthy. But there are more markers than just appearance.
Well,
So,
of course, and that's my point, that it's not that simple. And you
yeah,
can't just boil it down to that.
yeah,
In psychiatry, one of the earliest things I learned is that, and this is in the context of psychotherapy and psychoanalysis and that kind of thing, that that questions are important,
yeah,
and as in what's going on with me.
yeah,
Answers may not be as important as the question, in the sense that it is important to have that skill of being able to ask yourself the question.
Yeah.
But then, as you consider the answers, it's important to be honest with yourself
Yeah.
as opposed to being defensive or resentful or otherwise kind of deflecting something that's not comfortable to think about. So this is one of those areas where we do want to stay in touch with reality, and we want to have a um, a living life in a gray area,
Yeah.
in the sense that we don't want to be at the extremes that I'm either skinny or I'm hopelessly overweight and a very inadequate person because of it. There
Yeah.
is and so then the 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 point to be made is that of self-improvement. You're never going to lose weight to the point where you're perfect. You're never going to get there.
Yeah.
You may not get close, but it is important to try. It is important to think, I want to be as healthy as I can be.
Yeah.
Right? And I make a very strong point about that because being physically healthy, which includes very nutritious food, know what that is. Don't assume too much. And don't think that the standard American diet is anywhere close. It
Yeah.
is at the other extreme.
Yeah.
The extreme that turns out to be healthy is what our health nuts have been telling us all along. And the thing that your classical health nut does is they learn what health is and then they apply it.
Yeah.
And I find myself becoming one of those people because at my age, I'm starting to see things go wrong with my health. And I'm thinking, had I been paying attention to that all along, I wouldn't be thinking about it now.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but so at least now, I my goal is to learn a lot. I mean, I'm a doctor. You'd think that I would know about health, but doctors actually are not taught much
Yeah.
about health. Um, I mean, I heard a doctor on TV last night, one of our national leaders, talking about healthy versus having a virus.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, I understand what you mean, but you're talking about healthy as being an absence of disease.
Yeah.
Well, when you want to be happy, then what you want is a brain that's functioning as well as it possibly could.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're eating food that allows your IQ to drift upwards.
Yeah.
You're eating food that allows you to be in a good mood, feeling good, enjoying things that you might miss if you weren't. So you're letting your emotional abilities drift upwards as well. And then you add exercise into that. It turns out that exercise is very important to having a really healthy and well-tuned brain. So the combination of really healthy food and exercise literally lets your IQ and your emotional equivalent rise another 10 to 20 points.
Yeah.
Do you want that? Because it also translates into happiness, as
Yeah.
in good mood, joy, experiencing pleasure
Yeah.
to a greater degree. And
Well, and,
unfortunately,
and
people
that's
go in the other direction and they try to find that with drugs, alcohol, and food.
yeah.
Now we have
But
food.
but the thing is, so you bring up these health nuts, and when we are talking about holistic health, mind, body, all of this, like I think there are times where these health nuts can also be unhealthy too, because if I'm so extreme with my eating
Mhm.
that I go, oh no, there are foods that are off limits no matter how much I enjoy them, because when you talk about, I mean, there's different aspects of food, and enjoyment is one of them. I mean, I could eat chicken breast and broccoli every day, and I would be healthy, but maybe after a while I would get bored, and that is a part of your health, is enjoying the food that you're consuming. And and the thing is, if 5 pounds is the difference in me not eating chocolate time to time, like I go, I'm gonna sacrifice that 5 pounds so that I can enjoy my chocolate.
Right. Okay. So then I'm making a point about, being as healthy as you can be, and you're coming along and you're saying, and I agree with your point, that uh, that there are ways that to appear to be doing that, but then you're not. Because if you've got this body dysmorphic disorder, or if you've got the eating disorder equivalent of that, if you will, which might be anorexia,
Yeah.
then you're let's imagine, for instance, the anorexic is saying, oh, that's bad for me, I'm not going to eat that. That's bad for me, I'm not going to eat that. Okay.
Yeah.
So they never eat anything with sugar, they never eat anything with any fat in it, they
Yeah.
don't eat anything with any protein in it, and they don't eat anything with fiber in it, because it will just simply accumulate in their gut and they'll be fat. Well,
Yeah.
notice then they have eliminated everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing that they can eat. And in fact, everything is bad. And obviously, that's the extreme.
Yeah. And that's where the fear comes in. You go,
Right.
I'm
So,
afraid of food because all of it's bad.
right. So what we want, I think the point we're making here is that there is this area where you don't allow yourself to become too extreme.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you got to be honest with yourself that if you don't know what being really healthy is, and you're not willing to learn,
Yeah.
then there are going to be consequences of
Yeah.
that. Honestly, if you're being honest, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Heart disease, bad knees, uh, are the two most common old age things that happen, because a bad knee is directly related to being overweight.
Yeah.
Okay, because the knees were not designed to carry around that much weight
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
70 to 100 years.
Yeah.
So it's a mechanical wearing out thing.
Yeah.
There's not enough healing going on to stay ahead of that abuse.
Yeah. But to also
So
put that into
and
perspective, eating disorders have one of the highest mortality rates of any mental health illness. And so there is the point where you go, okay, in your effort, because a lot of people will say, I'm doing this to be healthy, and then they get sucked in. I call it the ed head, the eating disorder.
but Kim, people who are getting
I'm
into
not just trying to be
trouble,
healthy.
people who are getting into trouble are getting into trouble not because they're trying to be healthy, but because they're compensating for something else.
Yeah. But they have convinced themselves it's for health.
People who die from eating disorders have headed down a path where they cross a line into doing something that is extreme, and they keep going down that path.
Yep.
And so in my profession, what we try to do is try to catch people before they're too far across that line, such that we can kind of get them off that path if possible. Okay.
Yeah.
Notice once again, people are getting into trouble because they're extremes and comorbidities.
Yeah.
So what came to my mind first when you said people with eating disorders die? Well, they die because of anxiety, or they die because they're so malnourished. I mean, the extreme anorexic will die from malnutrition.
Yeah.
But your binge eater is not going to. The people with binge eating disorder tend not to die unless they've got other stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing when you talk about the binge eater, and this, honestly, this was a problem with my recovery, is because people would say things like, oh, well, you're not going to eat yourself to death. At least it's not alcohol or drugs. But what you're doing to your body, you don't realize, it is a slow death. And when you have this anxiety and you have this depression, a lot of times where those people end up killing themselves is either through damage they do to their bodies, with the cardiovascular disease and all of that, but, through suicide, because, the depression, is so great. And in our society, it pushes people to an extreme. It used to be that, the rotund female, that was the ideal body. And now we've almost gone to the other extreme that, it doesn't matter your age, you can't have wrinkles, you can't have cellulite. Like I see these tabloids that have, these beautiful, movie stars or supermodels. And, here they are on the beach and let me give you a close up of their cellulite. Let's airbrush them, so that, they look perfect on the cover of a magazine. And the ideal body these days, it's not realistic. And I think that, even when you talk about the muscle dysmorphia with men, it used to be guys, they were okay having a beer gut. Now it's like, if you don't have a six pack and, these 12, 16, 18-inch biceps and, all of these things, like you're not a man, or you're not like the ideal body. So.
Well, you're talking about cultural influence there. And so let's just say that a girl, okay, so I remember once, somehow I saw this picture of Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
And she's sitting on the beach.
Yeah.
And she has her arms kind of crossed. She looks topless, but then she's got her arms in such a way that you really couldn't see anything. But what you could see were her ribs.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's the ribs that jumped out at me, and I thought that's just not attractive.
Yeah.
But then it was intended to be, a glamorous photo.
Yeah.
And so then with that role model, yes. And so what we have to be careful about, again, is to stay somewhere between the extremes.
Yeah.
If you're Jennifer Aniston, then what you are doing is you are restricting your food to probably to an unhealthy degree, so that you can look good in photographs. That's what Hollywood does seem to idealize.
Yeah.
And for men, the equivalent is bodybuilding and the musculature and the shape. And even those with a swimmer's build want to be cut. And again, that's healthy.
Yeah.
Unless it's distorted to and extreme.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's not a problem if it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But if it's a problem, then it's a problem.
Yeah.
In the sense of what we're talking about, if there's a problem, it's because you're going too far with it. And so the idea is to stay between the extremes while at the same time being knowledgeable and informed about what normal actually is.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because even the relationship that we have with our bodies, like I remember when I was in high school, I ran track, I played soccer, I was a power lifter, a cheerleader, and so I held world records in powerlifting. But when I came into the military, they only looked at the body mass index. So when you talk height versus weight, I was over what I was allowed by the military. And so, but before I came in the military, my relationship with my body was, I'm an athlete. I'm strong as heck. I can run. I could outrun most of the men in my squad in the military. But because the military told me, you are fat, that totally changed my relationship with my body. Instead of being this strong athlete, I became the oversized fat girl. And so it's interesting how these things can change our perception of our bodies. And it's, innocent enough, the body mass index is supposed to, be a healthy measure, but it's not realistic for everybody. And so I think that when we look at our bodies, if we look at our bodies from the perspective of what does my body allow me to do, and what potentially is it not allowing me to do? Like if I'm overweight and I can't play with my children, I can't hike, I can't do these things, like maybe that's where we start to look at holistic health too, is what can my body do for me and what can't it do for me? Sorry, we're on a rant.
Well, okay. So if I may, I think you're going to be okay with this, but
yeah, absolutely.
I would like to psychoanalyze you for a moment.
Absolutely, Yeah, bring it.
Okay. All right. So when you were athletic, I imagine you being young, and you said powerlifting, which
Yeah,
involves muscle building, and you
yeah,
probably have a certain body type in
yeah,
which you are, shall we say, gifted in that area.
yeah,
And we know and then you said you could run faster than those in your squad. Okay.
yeah,
So then you went into the military, um, and I'm thinking, okay, I understand their tables
yeah,
that they would use to decide whether someone is overweight or not. And so, in that sense, maybe it is the case that there was some excess body fat going on. That if you were turned yourself into a runner instead of a
yeah,
body lifter, that then you would take on a leaner
yeah,
and lower weight.
yeah,
Okay, so that's where my mind went. Your mind went to straight to a self-esteem issue.
yeah,
That what you thought you were doing right all along had now been trashed, which
yeah,
says to me you had a fragile ego.
yeah,
And so it becomes then an issue of emotional maturity. And one of the reasons I'm saying this is because I think a lot of people listening to this would pick up on that. that
yeah,
that, that you kind of went to an extreme. You went from being very athletic to having this very poor self-image based on that one thing.
yeah.
Okay, and so I'm sure your emotional maturity has grown since then.
Oh
You
yeah, I
wouldn't
mean, I was
you wouldn't do
18.
that again. Okay, but then we go back, and this is more to your point. When you don't have the emotional maturity, then that can happen.
Yeah,
That and this gets back to what I was talking about earlier. When people die from eating disorders, it's because
yeah,
other things are going on. And so you in that moment, you might say, I don't know, but you might say that that was such an affront to your self-image
yeah,
that you became depressed and developed an eating disorder and became suicidal. And so, again, I don't know that that's the case at all. I'm saying hypothetically, that's how it could happen.
yeah,
And I think that's the point you're making. So the appeal is, let's be informed, and then let's take care of our children. Because a young person who might head in that direction ideally has a parent who says, "Wait a minute, honey, you got that wrong. You can't think that way.
yeah,
That's actually unhealthy."
yeah, yeah.
And so
Well, even
I believe, just to make this point, our
yeah,
children are not adults at 18.
yeah,
They
no,
look like it. In
no,
some sense they are, but their brains don't completely mature until age 25. We have to be there for them.
yeah,
They don't need us for much, but
yeah,
they still need us.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well, it's
this is
interesting to me that 12-year-old, I was appalled. 12-year-old girl had liposuction, and I said, what parent, and then the thing is, so she lost all this weight, and then she just progressively put it back on, and then they took her again for liposuction. And the thing is, it was interesting because the interviewer was like, if she's gained it back, maybe there's something going on, because both of her parents were, lean looking people. And what it
yeah.
really boiled down to is the parents were always fighting, and she resorted to food. And so like this is the thing, like when you see children getting liposuction, you see parents sending their kid off to fat camp. These things are it just reinforces that, oh, no, 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 there's something wrong with you. Like, we have to go to extreme measures to take care of that.
We have a rule as it applies to child psychiatry. And the rule is the problem is in the parenting until proven otherwise. So that's the point you're making, that children who are sent off to fat camps clearly have parents who don't know how to parent.
Yeah,
And I would say, whether it's your marriage or your children, don't assume that
yeah,
you know what you're doing unless you have made a point to learn.
yeah,
we live in an information age where there's a lot of stuff out there. And even though you might not agree with every detail, it is nevertheless a way for you to think seriously about what you're doing in your relationships with other people.
Yeah.
So if you're newly married, don't think that your marriage is going to survive because you just get along well.
Yeah.
It takes an effort and it takes some knowledge about what makes for a good relationship.
Yeah.
And the same thing with children. Don't assume that you know what you're doing,
Yeah.
particularly if your child's not doing well. You have to think first, I'm not doing something right here.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to go talk to somebody about how I am parenting my child
Yeah.
because what I'm doing isn't working.
Yeah. Well, and in fairness, if I want to drive a car, I have to go to driver's ed, I have to take a test and all this.
Right.
And I can have a child, and it's not easy. There's all these external influences. There's a McDonald's on every corner, they're hanging out with their friends, what they're eating at school, it's very difficult. So just because, and I think, a lot of parents, they don't want to say, hey, is this, and it's not that they're causing it. And a lot of times, things that, seem innocent enough, the way a child interprets it is not the way an adult interprets it. Like I was 18 years old and I interpreted, oh my gosh, my BMI is too fat, or too big, as I'm fat. There's something wrong with me. I need to fix that. And so, like it's not necessarily that they're bad parents. It's just I think with children, what we say is very important because we never know how that's going to be interpreted in a child's brain.
That's very true. And I would add to that I think the key to good parenting, and I have 3 young adult children who I'm very proud of. They've all turned out pretty well, and um, but I spent a lot of time thinking about how to be a good father.
Yeah.
My father made it a point to be a good father.
Yeah.
Problem is he also drank too much every night, and that did its damage. And I knew when I was a teenager I'm not going to be like him in that way.
Yeah.
None of us. So one rule is nobody had perfect parents.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have to take what you've got and make the best of it. But as a parent, you're not just trying to correct the wrongs of the previous generation.
Yeah.
You have to be paying attention. You have to be involved. You have to you have to know your child well enough that you sense what's going on with them.
Yeah.
I two of my children are uh, have kind of responded to what I call traditional parenting, which means when you correct them, that they learn. But one of them told me, and this coincidentally just yesterday, that it wasn't just that I corrected them, but I explained it,
Yeah.
and they responded to that
Yeah.
well. Um, my third child was different. He was a bit oppositional. He did not respond to correction. And I had to learn when he was 9 years old, this child is different,
Yeah.
and I actually had to do some reading.
Yeah.
And I concluded from that reading, I've got to think out of the box here. I've got to parent him differently. I've got to figure out what he responds to
Yeah.
and what I can do to bring that out. And I discovered that my job is to plant that seed in his brain
Yeah.
in a minimal amount of time and without any tone of criticism.
Yeah.
So I learned to say, could we have a parenting moment?
Yeah.
This is after thinking about what I was going to say for a couple of days often. And then I also had learned this rule. I've got 17 seconds to make my point before he zones out.
No.
Right?
Maybe you
I
need
call it my 17-second rule. But what I would do is I would say, John, I want to have a parenting moment. That was always okay. Here's what I want you to learn from that. And then I would say it. He would nod that he understood. End of conversation. There was no conversation.
Yeah.
And so I was teaching him what I wanted him to learn in a way that he did not resist.
Yeah.
And he's a very responsible, productive member of society now at 21 years old.
Yeah.
But I had to learn how to parent him, and that is the point.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people who are listening to this are struggling with eating disorders, and the the parenting is relevant in there, in that again, you didn't come into adulthood having had perfect parents,
Yeah.
and you're not perfect yourself. You never will be. The only thing you can really do is to learn how to be better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that needs to be good enough.
Yeah.
It needs to be good enough that you see yourself every 5 years or so being better than you were 5 years before.
Yeah.
And it goes on throughout life. And it is good to have a vision of the person you ideally would like to be before you die.
Yeah.
But then you're probably never going to get there perfectly, you
Yeah.
know. But getting close, you'll get close. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because when we talk about weight and wanting to be healthy, like a lot of times people think that, oh, like I'm just trying to motivate you to lose weight. And it's interesting because, the research has shown that weight stigma typically causes a person to gain weight. So it has the opposite effect of what people are trying to do. So the same thing with yourself. If you're going, what, I want to lose some weight, like beating yourself up and degrading yourself is not going to help you lose weight. So if you have a person who comes in, like what are some of the things that you work on with them?
What I have learned, and I have actually learned this personally. What motivates me to keep the weight off, or to, okay, let back up. Okay, I have a food problem. Okay, and I believe that those of us with a history of being overweight have an emotional problem with food. So
Yeah.
I try to meet it there. What is my problem? What kind of emotional thing is going on? I noticed recently, for instance, that I was stress eating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even yesterday, way too many nuts, way too many. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking I'm blowing it. I'm blowing it. So, but it was a day in which it was the end of a week that was exciting in a very positive ways. But then that is always, it's as if I was eating to tone myself down,
Yeah.
and I saw myself doing that. But then I woke up this morning. Okay, I'm going to go the other direction today in order to compensate for what I did yesterday.
Yeah.
Why? Because my drive is not focused on what I weigh, it's on being healthy.
Yeah.
Because when I overate yesterday, it was unhealthy food.
Yeah.
It was too much
Yeah.
nuts, which have a lot of fat in them, but that is still a whole lot healthier than what I would have done 6 months ago, which is
Yeah.
to make 3 peanut butter sandwiches
Yeah.
and binge on that,
Yeah.
which is actually what did happen. I caught myself binging. I've got a problem binging. That's
Yeah.
what that is.
Yeah.
And so now that I have the awareness about my tendency to binge, I don't binge very much. And when I do, I'm binging on healthy food. And
Yeah.
I consider that then to be an improvement.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
and so, what I try to do is I counsel people now, to answer your question, as I try to motivate them with the idea of changing into that person who wants to be truly healthy with
Yeah.
all the happiness
Yeah.
and self-esteem that
Yeah.
comes along with that. And you can have it all within a week.
Yeah.
You can stop eating healthy food, get unhealthy food, get back on the healthy stuff, get back on the treadmill. Not much at all. It doesn't take a lot in order to get your blood pumping, and then the exercise in combination with healthy food, and within a week,
Yeah. But
there's a
I think
noticeable difference in how happy you are.
yeah. But I think
That's the
more
motivator.
important for people with eating disorders, it's not necessarily losing that weight, because I think you have to start from a place of self-acceptance. So going, okay, this is where I am, and I'm going to have to be okay with where I'm starting.
That's true.
Because the things that we tell ourselves, and when you talk about awareness, that's a big one. Because if we start to tune into our self-talk, like there is no way we would talk to a friend like that. Oh, you're
Oh,
fat, you're
okay.
disgusting, you're
But the honest truth is, I'm okay, but my weight is not. I'm okay, but if I tell myself I'm healthy when I'm 50 pounds overweight, then I'm not being honest with myself.
yeah,
You know, there's what I call a reality there. But
yeah,
stop kidding yourself. Just be honest about what's going on, but don't let it be. Don't let your health be an indictment of who you are as a
yeah,
person. All
yeah,
right. The only thing to keep in mind is I'd like to be a better version of me,
yeah, yeah,
and I'd like to achieve that physically, because I want to enjoy it now.
yeah,
And I want to avoid being in the doctor's office every other day when I'm 70 years old, which happens.
yeah,
I had people coming into my office my age, and they're going from one doctor to another, thinking that that's just the life the cards they were dealt. No, it was the food you ate,
yeah, yeah,
and you're still 70 pounds overweight.
yeah,
You've given up on that too. So lest I sound judgmental, these are people who don't know.
yeah,
And they don't know because somehow that they didn't go get that information. You know,
yeah,
people are conditioned. I think it's changing, but people are conditioned to come sit in front of a doctor and submit themselves,
yeah,
rather passive way. Tell
yeah,
me what's wrong with me. Tell
yeah,
me what you recommend, and I'll do it.
yeah. Or give
Okay.
me a pill. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah,
Most
yeah,
people know how to do
if I
it.
need to take a new medicine, I can accept that. You're
Yeah,
right. Okay. And that's what medicine does. We fix things that are broken, only we don't fix them.
yeah,
And we certainly could do a better job of trying to get people to prevent them.
yeah,
As I've told you before, a lot of people don't want to hear it, but I
yep,
like to think that's changing. I like to think our civilization is evolving into this more truly enlightened group of people where we accept that eating the right foods and getting a certain amount of exercise every day, and avoiding any substance abuse at all, gives us brains that allow us to enjoy ourselves more.
yeah, yeah,
It's really that simple.
yeah. So we are getting at the top of the hour. So I just kind of want to wrap up some of the key points that we have highlighted today. And any last thoughts that you have before I do the wrap up?
Oh, I thought my last one was brilliant.
No,
I
that
don't
was brilliant. That's why.
think
But
that's really
I didn't know if you had more brilliance where that one came from. So, and I know you do. But so the things that we have talked about is accepting your body for what it can do and what it can't do. But also becoming real. And a lot of times go, hey, let's go get my blood pressure checked and know what that means. Let's get my blood lipids checked and know what
yeah.
that means.
And
Um,
not be afraid of it. Not be afraid of
yeah,
feeling bad about it. You see,
I'll be
that's
honest.
it.
I'm one of those people that totally submitted to my doctor. They would run whatever tests they wanted to run. They would tell me if it was good or if it was bad. And then maybe they'd give me a pill, maybe they wouldn't. But but what really like empowered me to recover was taking control of that. Going, okay, well, what does it mean when they tell me, my blood pressure is 160 over 102? And that was my wake
It's
up
an
call.
opportunity to learn.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, to know what it means and how I can affect it.
Yeah.
Um,
And so you learn a little bit now, and you keep learning a
yeah,
little bit as you go,
yeah,
and you end up over time knowing a lot.
yeah, yeah. So I would say one is let's look at reality. Let's look at like accepting where we're starting, but knowing that wherever you're starting is okay, but there's always room for growth. But it starts with that acceptance, and then connecting to your body. You know, a lot of people love yoga because it connects you with your body, you know, your whole mind body connection, and you know, just knowing what your body is capable of. So, and perfectionism, we talked about perfectionism. So you know, the ideal body is not necessarily what we see on you know, on the TV. You know, it might be airbrushed, but it's not realistic for you know, day-to-day life. What we're really striving for is health. So I think that's probably the number one takeaway is health is the ideal, not a specific body shape. So I mean, obviously there's extremes, you know, but there've been people that, you know, rail thin, they look like they're fit and they can't run to the mailbox. You know, so there are both extremes. Just because you're thin doesn't mean you're healthy. Just because you're overweight doesn't mean you're unhealthy. But there are extremes. You know, you can reasonably say that, hey, if you're this much overweight, you're probably doing damage to your body. So, but just, you know, loving the things about you and going, hey, you know, Terry's eye that I didn't even notice until he pointed it out to me, and I'm still struggling to see what he means, you know, but we are always our biggest critics. You know, we go, oh, you know, that one thing, you know, what, you don't see it? Like, let me point it out to you again. You know? But self-love is really big. So do we want to end on self-love?
Sure.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
Learn what that means.
Terry, as always, it has been a pleasure, and we have learned a lot from you. So we are looking forward to next time. But if you guys are in a place where, you know, maybe you don't love your body the way that you think you should, or, you know, you want to change, you're not quite sure how to do it, you know, maybe you want someone to kind of go along on the journey with you, you know, feel free to check out my website. You know, it's www.ourworldempowered. And even if you just go there for the free stuff, feel free, you know, whatever you can get from it. You know, so, and if you want to check out more of Terry's stuff, he is going to be at terryhaganmd.com, and that is please correct me if I get this wrong because I have spelling issues. terryhaganmd.com. And I got that right?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so again, we're going to have more team talks. We try to put them out every weekend, so come back and join us. Hit the subscribe button down below if you liked what you've heard. Share it if you think somebody, you know, could use some of the talk that we talked about today. You know, point out your favorite tips that we talked about, and if you hit that little bell, it will actually notify you when the next talk is posted. So until next time, get out there and love, live, and connect with the world around you. All right, we will see you later, audience, and we will see you later, Terry.
Goodbye, Cam. Enjoyed it.